I don't want your pity support. I want you to love what I'm doing, like love what my craft is.
I love this term, pity support. Would you say that women's basketball has had that in the past?
I think the tone has been that. Like, we have always had really very ride or die fans. Like, the WNBA is very loyal fan base. But I think now as it's growing, you have more of a casual fan, which is extremely important for the sport. Like, to have the casual fan is what makes it grow. I think it's a good thing. Like, you're always gonna have the haters and the controversy and the negative people, but you need that too. That's what grows the sport. And whether you hate it or love it, you're still watching, and that's giving us.
When Collier described what players are fighting for in the negotiations, salary increases, improved benefits, and equity within the league, she made a statement that carried enormous implications. She pointed out that many of those things already exist in Unrivaled. That comparison isn't just a casual observation. It's a powerful form of leverage. For years, the WNBA operated in an environment where players had very limited domestic options. If athletes wanted to earn significantly more money, they often traveled overseas during the offseason to play in international leagues. Those overseas opportunities provided higher salaries, but they also came with major challenges. Players had to adjust to different cultures, travel long distances, and spend months away from home. Unrivaled changed that equation. By creating a new professional platform inside the United States, the league introduced an alternative that didn't previously exist. Players could now remain in the country while still participating in high-level competition with substantial financial incentives. And the impact of that change extends far beyond one off-season league. It alters the entire negotiating dynamic between players and the WNBA. When Collier says it's difficult to accept less after experiencing what Unrivaled offers, she's describing a psychological shift that often occurs in labor negotiations. Once workers see a better model somewhere else, their expectations change permanently. The WNBA can no longer rely on the assumption that it is the only domestic platform available to elite players. That era may be ending.
Receive one from the players. A person familiar with the negotiation stated that the Associated Press on Sunday, the person spoke on conditions because of the sensitive nature of the negotiations. Now, the league response to a union proposal from Friday comes a few days before Tuesday's deadline set forth by which we know Adam Silver. Now, the union's previous proposal from a week ago had asked for an average 26% of gross revenue. Now,
And when you step back and look at everything happening right now, the negotiations, the rise of alternative leagues, the growing television interest, and the increasing visibility of women's basketball, it becomes clear that this moment represents something much bigger than a single labor dispute. What we are watching unfold is a turning point that could reshape the structure of professional women's basketball for years to come. For a long time, the WNBA operated within a relatively stable environment. The league had its challenges, but the overall structure remained consistent. Players signed contracts, many traveled overseas during the offseason to supplement their income, and the league maintained its role as the primary domestic platform for elite women's basketball. That system functioned in a predictable way for decades. But the landscape has started to change. New investment is flowing into the sport. Television networks are showing increased interest in broadcasting women's basketball. Sponsorship opportunities are expanding as more fans begin following the league and its players. At the same time, alternative projects like Unrivaled are introducing new ideas about how professional basketball opportunities might be structured outside the traditional league model. All of these developments are happening simultaneously, and they are creating pressure on the existing system. The WNBA is now negotiating with players who are more visible, more marketable, and more aware of their value than at any point in the league's history. Many of these athletes have large followings on social media, major endorsement deals, and the ability to attract significant television audiences. That increased visibility naturally leads players to ask new questions about how the financial success of the sport should be shared. From the league's perspective, however, the situation is more complicated. League executives must balance player demands with the financial realities of operating a professional sports organization. They have to consider long-term sustainability, franchise stability, and the broader business structure that supports the competition. That's why negotiations like the current CBA discussions are often so intense. Both sides believe they are protecting the future of the sport, but they may have very different ideas about what that future should look like. And that brings us back to the broader significance of Nafisa Collier's comments. When she talks about competition creating leverage for players, she's describing a shift that extends far beyond this specific negotiation. For the first time, the WNBA is negotiating in an environment where players can point to other domestic opportunities as proof that the market for women's basketball is evolving. That reality changes the tone of the conversation. It means players no longer feel entirely dependent on a single league structure. It means alternative models are beginning to influence expectations about salaries, benefits, and long-term ownership opportunities. And because of that, the outcome of these negotiations could set the tone for the next era of women's professional basketball. Whether the final agreement comes before the deadline or after further tension, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The balance of power in the sport is shifting, and both the league and its players are trying to figure out how to navigate that new reality. What happens next won't just determine the terms of the next contract. It may define the future direction of the entire sport.
Rivaled competitors against each other. What do you think about that narrative?
I disagree. I mean, first of all, we're in opposite seasons, so we're not even competing at the same time. But also, I think we really help each other, because one of the pain points was that when we aren't in the WNBA season, we go dark. By having Unrivaled, you still have all these star players who are on TV. Every single one of our games is on national television. So it keeps those names relevant. As Unrivaled grows and they go to the WNBA and they grow more there, then they come to Unrivaled and they grow more there.
Did the W ever have an opportunity to be involved with Unrivaled?
They did, yeah, we did offer equity before we launched.
This leads directly to the economic principle Collier addressed in her comments: competition. For most of its history, the WNBA effectively held a monopoly on professional women's basketball in the United States. While players had international opportunities, there was no comparable domestic league competing for their talent. In economic terms, monopolies tend to shape the terms of negotiations because workers have very few alternatives. If athletes wanted to play professional basketball at the highest level in the United States, the WNBA was the only option. That situation limited the leverage players could bring to contract discussions. But competition changes everything. When multiple organizations begin competing for the same pool of talent, athletes suddenly gain options. Instead of accepting whatever terms are offered, they can evaluate different opportunities and choose the one that best reflects their value. This concept is basic economics, but its implications for women's basketball are enormous. For the first time in the history of the WNBA, players can realistically consider alternatives that exist within the United States rather than overseas. Those alternatives come with modern facilities, national television coverage, and financial incentives that were once considered impossible for women's professional basketball. And because those opportunities now exist, they inevitably influence how players approach negotiations with the league. The entire structure of bargaining power is shifting.
Look at what's going on in the WNBA. You guys are going through your labor negotiations. What does Unrivaled do to set itself as a potential standard or a comparison for the W?
Everything we're fighting for is salary, benefits, equity in the league. We have all these things without needing to be asked at Unrivaled. We want for nothing here. And not only do we meet like the minimum standards that we're begging for in the WNBA, we exceed them. So players see here what professional life should look like. And so it's really hard when you've been given that to accept less.
I know Nneka Ogwumike is now involved with Project B, a league that is supposed to be more so the global landscape.
March 10th has become the date everyone in women's basketball is watching. That's the deadline looming over the negotiations between the WNBA and the Players Union, and as that date approaches, the situation has started to feel increasingly tense. Over the last several days, proposals have been moving back and forth between the two sides at a rapid pace. It almost resembles a high-stakes tennis match, with each side sending the ball across the net and waiting to see how the other responds. Neither the league nor the players want to appear weak in this process, but neither side can afford to let negotiations collapse entirely. According to reporting from ESPN, the WNBA submitted a counterproposal to the Players Union on Saturday evening. That response came shortly after the union delivered its own proposal on Friday. The fact that these exchanges are happening so close to the deadline tells you just how intense the negotiations have become. But the most important detail in this entire situation revolves around a specific number that the players placed on the table earlier in the process. 26%. That's the portion of the league's gross revenue that the players are reportedly asking to receive as part of the new agreement. In professional sports negotiations, percentages like that become the focal point of the entire conversation. They represent how the financial success of the league will be shared between the athletes and the organization that operates the competition. At the moment, the exact details of the WNBA's latest counterproposal have not been made public. But the fact that the league is still negotiating so aggressively with only 2 days remaining suggests that a final agreement is far from guaranteed. Deadlines in labor negotiations can sometimes push both sides toward compromise. But they can also harden positions if each party believes the other will eventually give in. And right now, based on the pace of these exchanges, it seems clear that neither side is ready to back down easily. That's why observers across the sports world are watching the calendar so closely. With the deadline approaching and proposals still being traded, the situation has reached a point where every new development could dramatically alter the outcome. If progress doesn't happen soon, the possibility of a lockout will become increasingly real.
There's more than anything, because when you have a monopoly, it's like you're only forced to do that one thing. By having options, it allows us to have leverage. where we don't have to just accept anything that you give us, because if you don't give us what we're owed, like, we have other places that we can go. And so when anyone has a job that is paying them.
Now pay attention to what Nafisa Collier acknowledged next, because this part of the conversation reveals something that the league has quietly tried to downplay. For months, many headlines have framed the relationship between the WNBA and the unrivaled league as a rivalry. The narrative suggests that the two organizations are competing directly with each other for attention, players, and television coverage. But Collier pointed out something that challenges that entire storyline. The two leagues operate during completely different seasons. The WNBA plays during the summer months, while Unrivaled was designed to take place during the offseason. That means they are not fighting for the same broadcast windows or forcing players to choose between participating in one league or the other at the same time. In other words, the rivalry narrative may be more about drama than reality. But then Collier revealed another detail that immediately caught people's attention. Before Unrivaled officially launched, the organizers reportedly approached the WNBA with an opportunity for the league to take an equity stake in the project. The WNBA declined. At the time, that decision might have seemed reasonable. New leagues often struggle to survive, and established organizations are naturally cautious about investing in uncertain ventures. But now that Unrivaled has successfully launched and is attracting significant attention, the league's decision to pass on that opportunity is being viewed in a very different light. Because Unrivaled is now creating a new standard for what professional opportunities in women's basketball might look like. Players participating in the league have been receiving equity stakes, premium benefits, and national television exposure for every game. That combination of incentives changes the expectations players bring with them when they return to WNBA negotiations. Instead of comparing their situation only to overseas leagues, they now have a domestic alternative that offers a different model. And that shift in perspective is beginning to influence how players evaluate the WNBA's current proposals.